Hello, my name is Mark Lardner, and I'd like to welcome you to Connecting the Dots, an If Center Live series focused on innovative approaches for translating assessment data into meaningful metrics within the helping professions. Thank you all for being here. Our discussion can only be enhanced by your participation, so please let us know who you are in the chat box and chime in throughout the discussion with any questions that you have. All right, I am very excited about today's guest, Dr. Scott Fairhurst. He's a national leader in data visualization designs that can help systems, programs, and individuals better understand the transformational process. He's a clinical psychologist and the vice president of outcomes and evaluation, business analytics, and training at Pacific Clinics, a large community-based mental health provider in the state of California. Not only will Dr. Fairhurst share his thoughts on meaningful metrics, but he'll demo some of the designs within the Pacific Clinics data system and speak to their application within direct care settings. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Scott Fairhurst onto the program. Scott, welcome.
Hi, Mark.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be able to share some of what we've been working on and hear what people think.
Great. I'm excited too. I think the first time you and I met to talk about this, I kind of had a loose idea about what was going to be in your data system. I was kind of blown away by it. So I'm really excited that the rest of our community gets to see this and really interested in kind of your thoughts on not only where it is now, but where you see it going. So as we, kind of before we jump in on your demo, one of the things I'm always interested in is people's thought process around design. And so, when you think about designing reports or user interface, what are the principles that guide kind of your design efforts?
The whole idea was to try to put something together that people could interact with and that they could find kind of clinically meaningful and valid. So it all started out with conversations with people at different levels of the organization, from clinicians to mental health workers, to supervisors, to executives, to ask, what are we trying to do and how do we hope it helps people? And within that, we were also keeping in mind, what could we possibly draw in from our electronic health record? What could we build from other areas that we might be able to integrate data from, so that we could build something that would allow people to kind of have a question and then get it answered right then and there. That idea of wait until the quarterly report and then maybe make a request to the data team and get your answer in 3 weeks. We wanted to get rid of that and have people be able to dialogue with our data.
That's excellent. Again, I think, that idea where there's a parallel process with a lot of the work within the TCOM community where everything does start with the conversation. And that, as that stands, again, that's probably different than a lot of people's experience where in having worked with different data systems, my role was to, spec out exactly what a report was to look like and send that off to some programmer who would do their best to interpret my specs and create something. But starting with those questions and with those conversations, certainly from what I've seen of your dashboards there, sounds like a winning approach.
The road testing that we were able to do early, and still even now, where we get feedback from other people allowing us to make those changes, kind of brings to mind, I think the best advice I got at the beginning of this was, I was told, if your model looks the same a year later, all that means is that nobody cares.
So again, that stands in stark contrast with probably a lot of our experiences and the static nature of the ERCR systems, the SACWA systems that we end up using. And so, again, maybe today is a way for a lot of people to press a little bit of reset button and rethink some of the dashboards they have or the reports they have once we, talk through some of yours. So would you be able to start sharing with us a little bit about your kind of overall design, or where do you want to start?
I'll introduce kind of some of the process where, for me, coming up with that way to get a sense of the model was one thing, but then being able to run across a couple of programmers who were able to kind of take those ideas and turn them into something, that was really meaningful. So as we're looking at all of this, I want to acknowledge that Alice Liu and Neil Getcha have been the primary programmers on any of these visualizations. And so this project is really about the way that, and I'll kind of put their superpower out there, they can take my clinical and turn it into logical in terms of how to make this stuff work. So now I'll get to showing it. So what you're seeing here is our agency's logic model dashboard. And I'll kind of give you a quick orientation to it. We've got 3 rows.
Okay.
The top row is engagement. The middle row is mental health treatment. And the bottom row is whole person care, physical health, substance use treatment, employment, housing, stuff like that. The 4 columns go like this. When our agency does certain things, then our providers will do certain things. Then our clients will experience certain things, which will then lead to certain outcomes. And this is a way of organizing the information so that if we wanted to look at a particular area, like to click on it, we would see stuff. So for example, here, for when our agency knows our demographics, that looks at the census, ages, ethnicity, language, diagnoses, sexual orientation, living arrangement, cities of residence. Down here in the whole person care, if we were to look at improved physical health and wellness, it would look at the vital signs that have been tracked. And in fact, I looked this morning and I was able to see we have 6 clients right now who are experiencing hypertensive crisis. The blood pressure is that high. And so the idea about who is accessing this information, how are they using it, our nursing staff are looking at this information so that they can keep track and make sure that we're putting kind of those quality improvement efforts to work the whole time. I'll spend our time today talking about the areas that connect with the TCOM tools. And we'll talk today about CAN's information we've got, and we'll talk a little bit about the SSIT as well, the Safe Systems Improvement Tool.
Great. Actually, one of the things too, before we move away from the screen, just this kind of simple idea that this is not a, put data in and get nothing back. This is really a thoughtful approach to thinking across, as I'm interacting with this, maybe I'm in that, kind of think about myself in that orange column, let's say our clients will, or maybe it's the reddish pink column where our providers will, but that it's part of a larger whole where people hopefully are all pulling in the same direction. Ooh, and I saw one of those comments too. If you don't mind, Scott, if you're able to click that hide button on the thing where right next to the blue where it says stop sharing. There you go. That's great. Thank you.
And so to your point, this pink column is our activities. Our providers will do certain things. And so often the idea has been just to track what it is that we do, but without the context of the way in which it'll make a difference and the way in which we want to be able to see that connection. And so, yeah, the arrows here kind of point, and you notice a lot of arrows point to this idea of experiencing high value services. So I'm going to start there. So if you were to click there, here's what you'd see.
Okay.
You have some drop downs up at the top that allow you to view it at different levels. Right now we're viewing our full agency. Well, actually half of our agency. Our agency recently merged. So we're looking at the agency, the half of the agency that's currently connected to this. We're busy connecting to the full agency now. You can also look a clinician's caseload, and you can look for a particular client. I'll give an example of that in a second. So what I've done here is I've looked from July 2022 until now, kind of this fiscal year sort of, looking at all of our clients to kind of maybe more closely look here to say those that we've worked with from July till now, 3,000 some, about 2,500 open this month, averaging about 3 actionable items. And here we can see the percentage of clients that have different needs that are present, as well as strengths. And for us, we kind of separate out strengths to build and usable strengths by looking at this one is an area in which there is interest, but it is not a usable strength. We've got other information in here as well, but I'll kind of go down to show some of the areas that connect. So for example, here, and I set this up for our clients under age 25, children and transitional age youth. This section also looks at medication information. So it shows us that a little bit more than a third of our clients are prescribed medications. And this allows us to look for our full caseload right now. The most frequently prescribed medication for our clients under 25 is an antidepressant, followed by a medication for ADHD, followed by an antipsychotic. And there are other medications in here as well that are part of that. Additionally, this section allows us to look at the modalities in terms of individual being at about 60% of the work that we do with our clients under age 25. And that might be individual skill building or individual therapy. We have a number of CPT codes that fit under that. The same that we do for family coming in at about 12%. That could be collateral, or it could be family therapy, or it could even be skill building with family present. I did this fiscal year, and so it's interesting how we can see how much telehealth we've done and how much telephone we've done. I'm happy to see that telehealth is higher than telephone here, but how much we've also done at school, in the office, and in the home. The next section that it shows is the hours billed. I'll skip that part just because it describes more about our agency than kind of I wanted to show in this area. But I want to get back up to the top where we can look at some of these drop downs that we have, those that I set for the agency view and the dates. But also here I want to highlight the diversity drop downs so that we can filter by ethnicity, language, gender, sexual orientation, diagnosis category, and age group. And this allows us to look out for potential vulnerabilities in certain populations or even potential disparities. And so this was all clients that I looked at. And so what we notice here is almost 5% of our clients have suicide risk that's causing functional impairment or that is dangerous or disabling. Well, what I did was I then filtered that to identify those who are in a minority group regarding sexual orientation, asexual, bisexual, gay, lesbian, the LGBTQ plus group. And when I did that, and you can see here, that's what I've specified.
I see.
The percentage of clients experience suicide risk went up from under 5, where it was 4.9%. Now what we're seeing is about 12.5%. So this idea of 2 to 3 times the likelihood to experience suicide risk for our LGBTQ plus clients puts us in a position where we can more closely focus our training on how to work with clients who are experiencing the stress more frequently than others.
That's fascinating. Again, I think, those numbers probably resonate with people. That this probably matches their experience, but there's something about saying, I know this kind of information from maybe a research article I read or larger knowledge in the field. There's something fundamentally different about saying, well, I'm actually seeing this within the people that we serve within our agencies. That idea of your kind of homegrown, quote unquote, research, super powerful.
And what we really are excited about is when supervisors are able to look at a clinician's caseload. I won't be showing one right now, but then we can kind of see what clients are they working with, what issues are present there, so that the supervision can be able to focus on those vulnerabilities as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think, even as I just, for a moment on that dashboard, which strikes me is that if I have some user interface that not only I can use as a kind of a mental health professional, a direct care worker, but my supervisor can use the exact same one. The person who is our program manager can use the same one. That actually shortens that learning curve across the team, right? Because we're all using that same. And also, the idea, I remember I'd read an article of yours a number of years ago about, clinicians working with young adults and mental health issues who had substance use co-occurring, and that there was a difference between the level of comfort working with alcohol addiction versus marijuana addiction, right? And so just really simply as a training tool, just a quick snapshot. If here's the most prevalent needs, do we all feel like we're trained up enough to try to address whatever those needs that are the highest presenting needs?
And one of the principles that we've really tried to incorporate here is to democratize the data, meaning give access so that everyone can have this shared set of facts onto which we can attach our story. So here where we're showing the agency level, we've talked a little bit about the clinician level, then to be able to go to the client level and help the client and their family engage with our employees in that same way. So let me show you what that looks like.
Great.
So here's a look at one of our clients. This is a client that we worked with from the fall of 2019. It's a little bit further. I looked through November of 2020, but this was the information we had. So when this person came to us, they were experiencing impulsivity and hyperactivity. Their school achievement actually was at enough risk that they were about to be kicked out. And the family was experiencing difficulties with residential stability. So at intake, we knew of 3 issues they were working on. And with a nod to Kate Cordell, looking at this idea of highest ever, 6 months into treatment, the family felt enough trust with the clinician to then open up about some of the trauma that the child had experienced, some of the caregiver's mental health challenges. And that then really let us know that in all likelihood here, when we were doing that intake, in all likelihood, we had 5 things we were working on. We only knew about 3 of them.
Right.
And so as we saw improvements made, we know that we went from 5 down to 1. The caregiver mental health remained an issue a year later, but it really gave the family an opportunity to recognize just how far they'd come. And part of that recognition is connecting what have we done and what kind of improvement has it led to. So just like on that aggregate level where we can scroll down, remember when we saw like the most common medications prescribed, antidepressants, and second most common for ADHD, we've got that same ability at the individual level. So here we could see that like the impulsivity and hyperactivity decreased to something to keep an eye on. And then the school achievement actually really was at that point no longer an issue. So and I'll just scroll past a couple areas to get to the meds. Here we can see that in September, the client was started on 5 milligrams of Ritalin, which then in November was changed to Concerta 18 milligrams extended release. This then helps the client and the family to hopefully be able to move away from this idea of med compliance, right? Changing their agenda to match the agenda of an authority figure toward med adherence, sticking with their own plan. Do we feel this works? Do we feel we want to continue this? And this notion for a kid of taking medicine, that really does kind of connect to their self-image and connect to how they feel that they're able to function. And seeing that connection helps people, I think, make more informed decisions. We're also able to look individually just at the same stuff we saw at the aggregate, but we're able to see the proportion of family work we've done to individual, the amount that's been done at school or over the phone. And sometimes we found that families might say, you know, I thought we had been doing more family, and maybe we need to. This is the area that I think we've found the most interaction with our families when they're dialoguing with the data, is we can show over the period of time, and here I looked at August 2019 through November of 2020, the amount of time per month for the services we provided, and then also with a ability to recognize the services that were provided after hours. And we can kind of say, okay, looking back over time, what do you notice? And you know, I would imagine your eyes are going toward May of 2020. That's kind of where people are drawn. And then the question is, well, you know, what was going on? Tell us the story about May of 2020. Because we did almost 20 hours of services that month. And even we started a skill building session at 6:30 in the evening and went until 8 in the evening. So a lot was going on in May. And then even after that, right, May is interesting, but you know what? So is June, July, and August in a different way, but it's interesting. And there's a story. And, you know, sometimes we have these annual meetings with clients where we say like, How do you feel your progress has been over the past year? Please. Nobody remembers.
I mean, without a doubt. I mean, I remember sitting in some of those where someone would say something like, okay, let's talk about the last 6 months, or let's talk about, and it's just, these things that are really in that moment, who can recall? Even looking at this, right? So I imagine myself, like if I'm that family member and I'm there in 11/2020, and we're kind of feeling really good. Maybe our service hours are down. I can scroll back up quickly to see if our needs kind of match that. But then I'm always trying to think, okay, so where was it? Where did we come from? When was it that we were feeling a lot of pressure or stress around this stuff? Where were we needing more supports? And what's now different now since the landscape's changed, right?
No, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
It's one thing for a treatment team to figure something out. It's a whole other thing for, it's that whatever insight means. I think insight means when someone comes to me and goes, you know what I figured out?
Yeah.
Like, I'm so psyched you did. I do want to show you an area that I'm most excited about here is for us being able to look at this client view. We can also do that because for our child clients, about 14% of the families prefer Spanish.
Okay.
So we can access that and pull it up in a way that allows the discussion to include their own language. Now, we don't have it in all of the languages that our clients meet, but we do have the ability to have the dashboard automatically pull up the client view in Spanish. So that's another area of when we talk about, inviting people to the party, you got to also ask them to dance, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing worse than saying, hey, let's look at this thing together. But there's really no way for that youth or for that family to engage in a way that actually matches their experience or even matches simply like the language they're most comfortable in.
You got it.
Yeah, that's outstanding.
So that's part of what our clients experience. Now I want to move to some of the outcomes and look at goals being met. And for this, we really wanted to try to capture the idea of how clients did in treatment, but I think very importantly, how clients are doing. If someone comes for 2 years, I want to know how are they doing 1 year in? Is there improvement? If you've had a family member with depression or if you've experienced it yourself, let's try to take care of it sooner than later. And depression improved in 6 months is a whole lot of life gained compared to one improved in 2.5 years. And so for this, we look at the intake amount of actionable items, the actionable items for clients with whom we're still working, and those that we discharged. And this is at the 6-month point. So I looked at clients that we've done an intake on since July 2020 till now. This lets us know that for those that we worked with for 6 months, we've seen an improvement, more dramatic for those who are discharged, down from about 3.5 actionable items to 1.9. Those that we still have shown some improvement, but not as much. At the 12-month period, we can see that in some ways, we've got a slightly elevated amount of actionable items at intake, also a slightly elevated number of highest ever. And that improvement is still happening. In fact, we see an improvement for these 204 clients who we discharged at the 12-month point. That's even more of an improvement than what we saw here for those at 6 months. Now we start getting into smaller items because we've not been doing this for too many years. So at 18 months, we have 42 clients that were discharged, and we don't want to get too excited about smaller numbers of information, but we want to kind of keep in mind the kind of improvement that we're seeing and that we saw. So this idea of first, ever, last is also including how did that look at the 6-month, 12, 18, and on.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think partly what you're giving voice to is something we talked about last time on the series with John, this idea first ever last. I know you referenced Kate Cordell too, who does a lot of visualizations using that. But that trend line too, that it starts to kind of give you reassurance about the work you're doing. So there's as you would expect, an increase in intensity and needs for people who are getting service for longer periods of time. And then maybe, again, the ends are really small there in that 30-month group, like you pointed out, but trying to figure out what is that sweet spot for the organization where we see diminishing returns the longer we're spending with the people we serve. And, again, probably clicking in, if I'm a program manager, again, this is not answering a ton of questions for me, but this is the opening to a dialogue with my clinical staff or the clinical staff and the families about kind of what are the needs that we're seeing that we're able to resolve in which timeframes. Where do we seem to be able to address things quicker? What things seem to take a little bit longer? But just having a chart that actually helps us think about the data this way, super helpful to get that conversation going, I would imagine.
And part of that conversation is, what are we doing along the way? I'm going to skip a bunch of other things. As you can tell, we do need to prune because we've got a lot that we can look at. But here's a section that says, let's see how the clients that currently show improvement compared to those that show no improvement. So this is a section where we have those in green are showing improvement. Those in gray have shown no improvement over the time. I'll do kind of for the 6 through 18-year-olds, that's a reliable change on the pediatric symptom checklist and a reduction in CANS actionable items. For the 19 through 20-year-olds, it's reduction in CANS actionable items. We've got our HEDIS measures here. We've got some other areas, but I want to show you one that's kind of interesting. This one where we were looking at modalities. You maybe remember that pie chart we looked at earlier under experience high value services, the degree to which we're doing individual work, family work, plan development, medication. And what you can kind of see here is there's really no difference between the 1,670 clients who are showing improvement and the 1,900 who aren't showing improvement. No real difference.
Okay.
However, going back up to that sense of using the diversity dropdowns, when I specified for elementary schoolers, kind of age 5 through 11, looking at only disruptive behavior, age 5 through 11, looking at only disruptive behavior. And I've already scrolled down. Well, now for these 115 clients that we've had, looking at their services, those that improve, their family and individual are balanced, just about the same. I mean, it's a slight uptick even on a little bit more family than individual work. Those that show no improvement, they averaged a whole lot more individual work than family work. And so this is another one of those cases, like you were mentioning, where we say, well, I've kind of heard and people say, if you're working with a disruptive elementary school, or the actions in working with the family.
Yeah.
But it's true for our folks.
Honestly, this is the first thing I would show to a new family, on our initial visit, to say, hey, you know what, fair enough. This is going to be hard. I know we're going to have to figure this out, but I want you to show how improvement works. And if we're talking about me just spending 50 minutes a week with this young person and, that's all we're going to do, this probably is not going to work. If you're able to partner with us on this stuff, man, we're going to see some good improvement. But as an engagement strategy, I feel like there's endless amounts of ways we could figure out how to use this stuff in our work to support that transformational process. In fact, one of the questions we have from, I think Kathleen or one of the others here, I'm trying to scroll through the questions that have been coming in, is, what is it that, how do you get staff to fully utilize this, or what parts of this does staff engage with in their interactions with the youth or the families that they're working with?
That question is really the key, right? I still enjoy that movie where they said, if you build it, they will come. But man, I no longer believe that statement. Right? You got to keep working to get people to come. You got to advertise it, talk it up, reward people every time they come. In fact, just this week, we've started a program. This is one that Neil worked on along with one of our other coders, David McAfee, where people are getting we're trying to gamify it a little and give people reward emails to say, congratulations, you visited the logic model dashboard 25 times. You now are at a point where you could even teach others, and we send them a nice picture. And so trying to encourage people to use it so that they break out of this idea that the outcomes belong to the outcomes department, or the
Right.
only reason to ever look at an outcome is to weaponize it and maybe punish someone for not doing enough of what they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
We want people to engage at the client level, clinician level, supervisor level, and up.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if the world was as easy, if you build it, they'll come, right? There would be no hopping in the van, the with Kevin Costner going to get James Earl Jones, right? You got to put in the work. But I do think, there is that idea too, that there is, and it's interesting to hear you say that. For some people, a look at this data about where we're showing improvement, where we're not, sometimes as a clinician, that can not feel like, oh, this is a guiding light to where I need to
Mm-hmm.
go, but this is an evaluation of my performance. And
That's right.
that's the exact opposite, right? It can be weaponized, and it is about trust building, I would imagine, within an organization.
There is no question that management, and even for us who are working on this and road testing it, like I mentioned before, our ability to make adjustments when someone requests it. We had a section here that kind of looked at our clients will experience integrated SUD treatment, or that we will address substance use. Well, someone, called us up and said, but I really want to know which substances they're diagnosed with. I want to be able to spot the opioid users compared to those and be able to see, is there a difference between people diagnosed with schizophrenia and which substances they tend to use, and people diagnosed with depression and which substances they use. And for us, the race is on. When someone asks for something like that, they're an engaged person. We want to give them their suggestion within a matter of days.
Okay. And so that answers, Kathleen had just posted in the chat a question which says, what are some strategies to successfully gain support from staff and leadership? And so certainly finding that captive audience, someone who's engaged and meeting their need, is the way to go.
About a year ago, or I should even say 2 years ago, we started using the Safe Systems Improvement tool for our
Great.
critical incidents. And I want to spend just a couple minutes there if we can.
Okay, good. And
That
while you're pulling that up, I just want to remind folks, so the Safe Systems Improvement Tool, the SSIT, that's something designed for critical incident reviews. The goal is to move away from ideas about shame and blame, whose fault was it that this thing happened, and move towards an idea that there are factors associated with these incidents, that the more we can better understand, the more we can do organizational learning.
Absolutely. This idea of because something went wrong, someone messed up,
Right.
is kind of a pervasive, poisonous cultural history that we've got, particularly in agencies or industries where something really bad might sometimes happen. And so for us, if a client dies by suicide, or if someone else dies by the hand of one of our clients, those are critical incidents. If someone overdoses, critical incident. And for us to then be able to look at the degree to which, say, teamwork or coordination or the demand resource mismatch may have played a role, becomes an important way that not only we debrief and provide perspective to people, but also the way in which we can aggregate it. So that's what I want to take a look at now, is the way that here, and I won't pull up our full chart so that I can kind of keep more discrete about the amount of critical incidents that we've had, but it then gives us a chart that looks at the different areas on the SSIT after our teams have gone over these and debriefed, and then we enter in the results into the app that was built. This app was built by Nort Kazarian. And here what we could see, for example, like with teamwork and coordination. So with the app, the way we've got it built, if you click on this bar, then what it shows are, of all of the meetings that we've had, of all the critical incidents, what improvement recommendations did anyone make in that meeting related to teamwork and coordination? And so that allows us to then look over, when we're doing our full review, to identify improvement initiatives to prevent critical incidents from occurring. Separated from each incident, we can then just look together at all of the suggestions. So we can hear, and we also have the person's name. I just kind of removed that from this. The name of the person who made the suggestion, but building a culture where it's okay to ask for help or a consult without stigma when a person enters a riskier phase, or motivational interviewing with an emphasis on coordination of care, or collaboration with external resources in an attempt to gain prior records. These three may be related to three different incidents, but they're all connected to this idea of teamwork and support. And so that's when we do our annual meeting to take a look at what initiatives do we want to put in place to prevent critical incidents from occurring. That's how we do it. Now, certainly within the SSIT, when we look at any given incident and we look at something that may be a 3, meaning that it's proximal to
Right.
the event, we may then put in an improvement initiative right off the bat at that point, because we don't need to wait for that to add up to any kind of pattern.
Right.
The kind of thing when it doesn't take but a couple overdoses to initiate a Narcan initiative to make sure that we've got Narcan in the hands of everyone who works with our higher risk clients, stuff like that.
And again, I think that's the beauty of using a tool like the SSIT. It becomes not just about this one incident, finding blame. It's that aggregation of all those stories and saying, what can we learn as an organization? How can we guide our performance improvement? And what I'll do is, for those who are not familiar with SSAT or less familiar, I'll put a link to some information down in the comment section underneath this video when we post it on YouTube. All right. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, Scott. One thing before we wrap, we started out our conversation. You had shared that, if you have, I'm paraphrasing, if you have the same data slide or data report that a year later with no modifications or enhancements, maybe you're doing something wrong. So kind of talk to me a little bit about what you're excited about, innovations or new reporting applications that you have coming down the line, or what Pacific Clinics is doing to further the visualization game within the organization.
One of the benefits of our merger is that ability to look at the patterns and habits that each have. And there's one that the Northern California part of Pacific Clinics has done, including kind of an annual consult with each individual program to talk about what they hope is happening, to really redo and customize their logic model, and to be able to look at what individualized logic models might look like for particular programs. This idea that we're really chasing is the mass customization, so that a system like this is continually updating and continually improving. And anyone could look at it and say, thanks for building something that fits me perfectly.
Yeah. That's exciting. All right. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your ideas and your work with us. It's really been a pleasure. So thank you.
Thanks.
All right. And thanks to everyone who was able to join this episode. And thanks for all the comments. Really appreciate you being here. Again, our next episode is going to be March 14th, that wonderful dynamic where February and March line up when there's 28 days. So 4 weeks from now, we'll be meeting with Gavin Rain, an epidemiologist at the University of Kentucky. He's going to discuss the importance of how we talk about the work of helping others from a research perspective, making sure that we understand the context of the work we're trying to better understand. And so I think that'll be a fascinating discussion, a bit different from today's, but we're trying to get as many voices onto this series as possible to share their thoughts on the work of making meaningful metrics. And if you're new to the TCOM channel and you enjoyed any part of this, please click that like button and subscribe. That'll help you stay up to date on everything going on the TCOM channel. Even just me, I really appreciate that. Last night, I was able to catch up on Dr. Fernando's discussion with Dr. Chris Bolonsi about their EQIP, the qualified individuals work that's happening within the child welfare space. And that was a fascinating discussion. If you missed that, please go back and check that out. It was fascinating. So there's an updates to the blog all the time. I'm going to put the link to that in the description below. Once again, please like and subscribe. I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for all you do to help create systems that care. We'll see you next time on Connecting the Dots.